When I saw the old sedan with military bumper stickers parked outside my library with someone clearly living inside, I knew I had to help. As a librarian struggling to pay bills after losing my veteran father 6 months ago, I understood what it meant to have nowhere to turn. You won't believe what happened next. I never expected giving Simon my entire emergency fund would lead to a Pentagon courier arriving at the library with a check for $50,000 and the revelation that my father had saved 3 lives in Vietnam decades ago, including Simon's father. Sometimes when you think you're helping a stranger, it could turn out that you knew them all along. Hi everyone, welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now let's dive into today's story. The modest 2-bedroom house that Anna Barrington called home felt increasingly empty and financially burdensome 6 months after her father's funeral. With medical bills from his cancer treatment and funeral expenses having completely drained the savings account they had carefully built together over 18 years of shared responsibility and mutual care. At 38, Anna had spent her entire adult life as the primary caretaker for her father, Robert Barrington, a Vietnam veteran whose PTSD had made steady employment difficult and whose pride had prevented him from seeking the VA benefits he deserved until it was too late to make a significant difference. Anna's job as head librarian at the Maple Grove Public Library provided a modest but reliable income that had been sufficient when shared with her father's disability payments, but now felt inadequate to cover the mortgage, utilities, car payments, and daily expenses that seemed to multiply every month despite her careful budgeting and frugal lifestyle. Her father had insisted she maintain a $1,000 emergency fund in a separate savings account, repeating his military wisdom that you always need something to fall back on because the world doesn't stop spinning just because you're having a bad day. The check engine light in Anna's 10-year-old Honda had been flickering intermittently for 3 weeks, threatening an expensive repair that would likely cost more than her monthly grocery budget and force her to choose between fixing her transportation to work and paying other essential bills. She had been postponing the diagnostic appointment, hoping the problem would resolve itself or at least wait until her next paycheck, while knowing that her father would have insisted on addressing mechanical issues immediately before they became more serious and costly. Anna's daily routine at the library provided structure and purpose, but she was constantly aware of being one unexpected expense away from financial disaster, living paycheck to paycheck while maintaining the cheerful, helpful demeanor that her patrons expected from someone whose job was to assist others in finding information, resources, and solutions to their problems. She took pride in her work and genuinely enjoyed helping people. But the stress of her precarious financial situation was becoming increasingly difficult to manage without her father's steady presence and practical advice. On this particular rainy Tuesday morning in late October, after spending the weekend reviewing her budget and trying to identify additional areas where she could reduce expenses, Anna was opening the library for another day of serving her community while privately worrying about how she would handle the next financial emergency that seemed inevitably approaching. Anna Barrington unlocked the front doors of the Maple Grove Public Library at exactly 9 a.m., following the same routine she had maintained for 6 years as the head librarian of the small but well-regarded institution that served their rural community of 8,000 residents. At 38, Anna had found deep satisfaction in her work despite the modest salary, taking pride in helping patrons access information, resources, and services that enriched their lives and connected them to the broader world beyond their small town. The morning rain had started before dawn and showed no signs of stopping, creating the kind of grey, dreary atmosphere that typically kept patron numbers low and gave Anna time to catch up on cataloguing, administrative tasks, and the endless grant applications that provided supplemental funding for library programs and services. As Anna was setting up the front desk and preparing the coffee that had become a popular amenity for early morning visitors, she noticed an old blue sedan parked at the far edge of the library parking lot. The car's windows were slightly fogged, and she could see someone sitting in the driver's seat in a posture that suggested they had been there for quite some time, possibly all night. Military bumper stickers covered the rear window of the sedan, and Anna could see enough detail to recognize the distinctive insignia of the United States Marine Corps, along with slogans supporting veteran causes and POW MIA awareness. Her father's own military service had taught her to recognize the signs of a veteran in distress, and something about the car's occupant triggered the same protective instincts that had guided her care for Robert Barrington during his most difficult periods. Anna grabbed 2 cups of coffee and walked across the parking lot through the steady rain, approaching the sedan with the careful, non-threatening manner she had learned to use when dealing with her father during his PTSD episodes. She tapped gently on the driver's side window and smiled warmly when the occupant rolled it down partially. "Good morning," Anna said, extending one of the coffee cups toward the car. "I'm Anna, the librarian here. It's pretty cold and wet out here, and we have free coffee and a warm place to sit inside if you'd like to come in for a while." The man behind the wheel appeared to be in his early 30s, with the short haircut and upright posture that clearly indicated military training, despite his worn civilian clothes and several days' worth of beard growth. His eyes showed the particular combination of wariness and exhaustion that Anna had learned to recognize in veterans who were struggling with the transition to civilian life. "I'm Simon Fitzpatrick," he said, accepting the coffee with obvious gratitude. "I don't want to cause any trouble. I was just trying to get some rest before driving on, but the rain's been coming down pretty hard." "No trouble at all," Anna assured him. "We don't open to the public for another hour, but you're welcome to come inside and warm up. I usually have the place to myself in the mornings, and it's much more comfortable than sitting in your car." Simon hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his options and perhaps assessing whether Anna's offer was genuine or merely polite courtesy that he was expected to decline. Finally, he turned off his engine and followed Anna through the library's front entrance into the warm, well-lit interior that smelled of books, coffee, and the subtle cleaning products used to maintain the building's welcoming atmosphere. "Marine Corps?" Anna asked, gesturing toward a comfortable reading chair near the circulation desk while she poured a fresh cup of coffee for Simon. "Yes, ma'am. Captain Simon Fitzpatrick. 3 tours in Afghanistan before I got out last year," Simon replied, settling into the chair with the careful movements of someone whose body had been through significant trauma. Anna nodded with understanding rather than the empty gratitude that many veterans received from well-meaning civilians who had no real comprehension of military service or its lasting effects. "My father was Army Vietnam. 2 tours before he came home and spent the next 40 years dealing with what he saw over there." The shared understanding of military family experience immediately changed the dynamic of their conversation, allowing Simon to relax slightly and begin sharing the circumstances that had brought him to Anna's library parking lot during a rainstorm. Simon explained that he had been a decorated Marine captain who had led his men through multiple combat deployments, earning commendations for bravery and leadership that had seemed to guarantee a successful transition to civilian life and career opportunities when his service ended. However, an IED explosion during his final deployment had killed 2 of his men and left Simon with a traumatic brain injury that affected his concentration, memory, and ability to manage the stress and complexity of civilian employment. His VA disability claim had been pending review for 8 months, while he struggled to find steady work and maintain stable housing on the minimal savings he had accumulated during his military service. The bureaucratic delays and seemingly endless paperwork requirements had exhausted his financial resources and tested his patience beyond its limits, creating a cycle of frustration and despair that was tragically common among veterans navigating the transition to civilian life. "I lost my apartment last week," Simon admitted, staring into his coffee cup rather than meeting Anna's eyes. "The VA says my claim is under review, which apparently means it could take another 6 months or longer. I've got a buddy in Colorado who can get me work on a ranch. Good work, steady pay, a place to live, but I need gas money to get there." Anna felt her heart breaking as she recognized the same pride, frustration, and quiet desperation that had characterized her father's most difficult periods. Robert Barrington had often struggled with asking for help, viewing his need for assistance as a personal failure rather than a natural consequence of serving his country in an unpopular war that had left lasting physical and emotional scars. "How much would you need for gas?" Anna asked, already knowing that she was going to help regardless of the amount or the impact on her own precarious financial situation. "About $200 would get me there," Simon said, finally looking up to meet her eyes. "I know that's a lot to ask from a stranger, but I'm good for it. Once I get this job, I can pay you back with interest." Anna looked at Simon's worn clothes, his thin jacket that would provide little protection against Colorado's mountain weather, and the obvious exhaustion that suggested he had been living in his car for several days. She thought about her father's teachings about helping fellow veterans and the kindness that strangers had shown to Robert Barrington during his most vulnerable moments. $200 isn't going to get you there safely," Anna said firmly, walking to her purse and retrieving her phone to access her banking app. "My dad always said that when you help someone, you do it right. $1,000 will get you to Colorado with enough left over for food, gas, and maybe a motel room along the way." Simon stared at Anna in complete shock as she initiated a bank transfer from her emergency savings account, the $1,000 fund that represented her entire financial safety net and her father's final gift of security and peace of mind. "I can't accept that much money," Simon protested, his voice thick with emotion. "That's probably everything you have." "It is everything I have," Anna admitted, completing the transfer and showing Simon the confirmation on her phone screen. "But my dad always said that money in the bank doesn't do any good if you're not using it to help people when they need it most. Someday, you'll be back on your feet and you'll help someone else. That's how the world keeps spinning." Simon's eyes filled with tears as he accepted Anna's extraordinary generosity, clearly overwhelmed by the kindness being shown by a complete stranger who was making a significant personal sacrifice to help him reach safety and opportunity. "I need to tell you something," Simon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My father is General Marcus Fitzpatrick. We haven't spoken in 7 years because of a falling out after my second deployment. My pride kept me from reaching out to him even after I started living in my car." Simon paused, collecting himself before continuing. "What you just did, a stranger caring more about my welfare than my own family, that's a sign that maybe it's time I called him. Maybe it's time I stopped being too proud to accept help from people who love me." Anna felt a complex mixture of panic about her own financial situation and deep peace about her decision, knowing that her father would have made the same choice without hesitation. She had just given away her only financial security to help a veteran reach safety, but she felt more aligned with her values and her father's memory than she had since his death. At 4:30 that afternoon, as Anna was preparing to close the library and drive home to figure out how she would manage her expenses without any emergency fund, a young man in a crisp military uniform entered the building and approached the circulation desk with official purpose. "Ms. Anna Barrington?" he asked, presenting military identification and a sealed envelope bearing the official seal of the Department of Defense. "Yes, that's me," Anna replied, her heart racing as she signed for the envelope and watched the courier leave without explanation. Inside the heavy, official envelope, Anna found a formal letter on Pentagon letterhead and a cashier's check for $50,000. The letter explained that the payment represented fulfillment of a promise made to her father, Staff Sergeant Robert Barrington, over 40 years earlier during classified operations in Vietnam. The letter revealed that on February 15, 1973, during a covert reconnaissance mission, her father had volunteered to create a diversion that allowed 3 wounded comrades to escape an enemy ambush, nearly sacrificing his own life to save theirs. The mission had remained classified for decades, and her father had been ordered never to discuss the details, even with his own family. One of the men Robert Barrington had saved was Lieutenant Marcus Fitzpatrick, who had become General Marcus Fitzpatrick and was the father of Captain Simon Fitzpatrick. Anna's act of kindness towards Simon had brought her existence to their attention and provided the opportunity they had been seeking for decades to properly honor her father's heroism and sacrifice. Anna's phone rang as she was still processing the information in the letter, and she answered to hear a distinguished voice identifying himself as General Marcus Fitzpatrick calling from Washington, D.C. "Ms. Barrington, there are some people here who have waited a very long time to thank you and honor your father's memory properly," the general said. "Would you be willing to fly to Washington tomorrow? We'll handle all arrangements." The next morning, Anna found herself on a small military aircraft bound for the nation's capital, still carrying the check and letter that had transformed her understanding of her father's military service and sacrifice. At the Pentagon, she was escorted to a conference room where she met General Marcus Fitzpatrick, Admiral Thomas Bradley, and Colonel William Hayes, the 3 men her father had saved over 4 decades earlier. They told her the complete story of the classified mission, her father's voluntary heroism, and their decades-long search for Robert Barrington, who had never responded to their letters because he had already been diagnosed with cancer and was focusing all his energy on preparing Anna for life without him. Captain Simon Fitzpatrick entered the room looking clean, well-rested, and wearing a proper uniform, expressing his profound gratitude to Anna for the kindness that had not only helped him reach safety, but had also led to his reconciliation with his father and the revelation of their family's connected history. General Fitzpatrick offered Anna a position with the Pentagon's new Veterans Outreach Initiative, a program designed to connect struggling veterans with resources, support, and opportunities while ensuring that their service and sacrifice are properly recognized and honored. "We need someone with empathy, integrity, and understanding of both the civilian world and veterans' challenges," General Fitzpatrick explained. "Someone who demonstrates through her actions that she understands what service and sacrifice really mean." The position came with a substantial salary and the opportunity to make a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and their families using her skills as a librarian and her personal experience as a veteran's daughter to bridge gaps in communication and understanding. Anna accepted the position immediately, realizing that her father's wisdom had been proven once again. The world keeps spinning, and sometimes it spins you exactly where you need to be. 1 year later, Anna Barrington stood at a podium in the Pentagon courtyard, addressing hundreds of veterans and their families as the director of the Veterans Outreach Initiative. She shared her father's philosophy that the smallest actions create the greatest ripples, traveling across decades and connecting lives in ways we could never predict. keeping the world spinning in exactly the right direction. Her act of kindness toward a homeless veteran had revealed a 40-year connection, honored her father's memory, and provided her with a career dedicated to ensuring that no veteran would ever have to face their struggles alone. Sometimes, when you feel most lost, the world is actually spinning you toward exactly where you need to be, guided by the love and sacrifice of those who came before, and the compassion we show to those who need help today. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.